I'm now joined by my panel, Michael Walker of Navarre Media and the author and journalist Harriet Sargent. Thank you both very much for joining me. I just wanted to start with the very chilling comment that was made after the Brighton bomb when the IRA said we only have to be lucky once. And I wonder if we might not be being too harsh on MI5 by holding them responsible when actually we know they've stopped lots of terrorist attacks and one got through. Or am I setting too low a bar for them, Harriet?
I actually think it's a bit rich that we're being so harsh on MI5. I mean, if you actually read the report, it's one man made one mistake. He should have passed on a report a day earlier, and he didn't. And that seems to me quite not a very high-risk activity to have caused so many deaths. And I think MI5 is actually carrying the can for the failure, and the far bigger failure, of our immigration system, of our asylum and immigration system, and that we have at the moment large numbers, literally thousands of people coming into this country, and the border control have no idea of where they come from, or even basic things like what their age are. And yet suddenly MI5 is meant to know everything about them and being able to make a risk assessment. And Michael, that seems crazy.
Do you think that's fair? I mean, it turned out that I was being looked at by Prevent because they thought I was so dangerous because I seemed to be in favour of Brexit. And that is worrying, that they were looking at people who are elected politicians and they were letting real terrorists through the net.
I'll put that to one. I don't want to cast aspersions about how extreme your opinions are.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, I didn't hear the contributions of your previous contributor. But I do want to, I suppose, comment on the whole framing of this discussion, because we've had a report, which I think was quite a serious report, independent public inquiry. And what that has suggested is that there were serious failings from MI5. And yes, as you say, potentially this was one person's human error. But the big picture here, which we're not talking about, I think, is that this guy had come back freed 4 days earlier from Libya. Yeah. And that wasn't an immigration issue. This was a British citizen, and he had gone to Libya to fight with jihadists, and that was part of British foreign policy. So for a long period, MI6 were quite keen on jihadists going because they thought they would fight Gaddafi and they would fight on the UK side. And so for us to be having a conversation about political correctness, cancel culture or immigration, when there is a serious government failure. So
you're saying there was a simple foreign policy failure, they were worried about Syria but not about Libya?
No, so that's not the failure that's not the failure I'm talking about. The failure I'm talking about is thinking that it's a sensible foreign policy to take out foreign leaders, as we did in Libya in 2011. We said we were just going to be doing a no-fly zone, but we went for regime change. At the same time...
Do you think regime change is a sensible foreign policy?
You're misunderstanding me.
Sorry, I thought you said that.
The foreign policy, which I am saying is a mistake,
yes, I agree
was
with that.
to bring about regime change in Libya. And at the same time, because MI6 thought it was useful to overthrow Gaddafi, to allow jihadists to go and fight in that civil war. Now, Salman Abedi, he learnt how to make a bomb in Libya, fighting in a civil war which started because of British foreign policy. And this to me seems much more important than political correctness. In this very sensible report, political correctness wasn't mentioned at all.
Well, can I just say that actually it is about immigration, taking your point, because Salman's father, Ramadan, originally was fighting for the Free Libya, the jihadist, and was actually a terrorist and part of a terrorist organisation. And yet he and his family were given asylum in the UK. And he then took his sons back to Libya, and they took part in the armed insurrection that was going on there. I mean, there's even
with
on
the
his
blessing of our security services.
Well, whatever.
But the report does mention the radicalisation through the family, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's a really important part of the problem.
And they were
so Harriet's point
exactly.
to that extent is fair.
He was actually carrying on Facebook carrying a machine gun of this 15-year-old boy. And then his mother and his family, they all moved back to Libya. And then the mother was still receiving benefits, housing benefits, tax credits were going into her account in London. And the bombers went back and used that money to bomb British citizens. So I would say it's a failure, quite an extraordinary failure on our immigration.
Because someone migrated to the UK in the 1980s and then had a child.
Someone was given.
I mean, if this is your anti-terrorism policy, what you're going to be doing is deporting everyone who migrated here in the past 40 years.
We should just simply know who is coming into the country.
We did know who was coming. We knew who this person was. We knew he was going to Libya. We knew he came back from Libya.
He was a member. No, I'm talking about his family. We did not know that his father.
Why don't we talk about the person who actually did the bombing?
We did not know that
the report
his
says he was
father-
radicalised by his family. So it's fair to talk about his family.
He was radicalised. The report says his family had a role. The report, though, is quite specific.
And that his brother was involved and so on.
He became a terrorist fighting in the civil war in Libya. That's where he learned how to build bombs.
But the report also
and the report
notes...
also suggested he returned back to Britain, potentially with a detonator in his luggage, and MI5 didn't check that. Now, that to me seems like a real error, and that's not about political correctness.
But the security guard did not go up to him because he thought he'd be accused of being a racist. So there is a politically correct element.
So that's one very specific part, and I think it's also important to put that into context, right? So one, the fact that you had someone who was able to go to the Manchester
Arena
with a big bomb in his rucksack.
Because if the security guard had gone up to him, it would not have happened. So you take out the final safety check because you're politically correct.
That wasn't actually the final safety net. So what actually happened in that situation is you had a security guard who saw someone looking suspicious, right? They thought they looked suspicious. And instead of going straight up to them, because I think it's a very reasonable worry that someone might have. Am I just going up to them because of prejudice? He didn't say...
What got 22 women killed.
No.
So, sorry.
What got 22 people killed
What should I be worrying about? Yes, about prejudice
sending people out to go and fight a civil war in
children.
Libya. But then this is also important, so let me finish. So after he saw this person and decided, I'm not going to go straight up to him, what he did was radio to his superiors. The radio was jammed. He also would have at that point passed this on to the British Transport Police.
But it didn't happen. We're going to have to move on, I'm afraid. We are going to have to move on. Thank you very much, Michael and Harriet.